يقدم لكم هذا البرنامج برعاية مجمع مدار.
Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to our L24 special coverage on the Algerian president's tour that led him to Qatar, China and Turkey. President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, wrapped up today his 5-day state visit to China on Friday, a visit that culminated in several substantial memoranda of understanding and agreements paving the way for promising horizons of comprehensive cooperation based on mutual interests in a way that serves the new development goals, especially for Algeria, which aspires to bring about a strategic transformation of its economy within a few years, notably through joining the BRICS group. The back-to-back state visits demonstrate Algeria's commitment to fostering strong relationship with its international partners and seek mutually beneficial alliances. As President Tebboune embarks on the next leg of his diplomatic mission, the nation eagerly awaits the outcomes of these strategic engagements. And to have clear vision and ideas over this visit to China, I'm joined live by Yukon, CGTN radio anchor and former Washington correspondent from Beijing. Also, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, journalist, author and political analyst from London, alongside with Edmond Gharib, Professor of International Relations at Georgetown University from United States. Gentlemen, thank you ever so much for accepting our invitation to this special coverage, and to you, our dear viewers, short break and we start our debate. Hello again and welcome. So, starting our debate from this piece of information, the Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune revealed that Algeria submitted an official request to join the BRICS Bank. During an interview with the Chinese TV channel CCTV, President Tebboune affirmed that Algeria had submitted a request to be shareholder in the BRICS Bank with an amount estimated at $1.5 billion. The Algerian president said that his country's accession to the BRICS group opens new horizons for Algeria.
العالم تاع البريكس يساعدنا أكثر، وبهذه المناسبة طالبنا رسميا الانضمام لمنظمة البريكس وانضمامنا رسميا إلى بنك البريكس، وراسلنا السيدة المديرة رئيسة برازيل سابقة أن نكون أعضاء في مساهمين في بنك البريكس، والمساهمة الأولى نتاعنا ستكون ب1.5 مليار دولار.
So, Mrs. Liu Kun, since you are in China, I'll be starting with you. What is your assessment of the outcomes of the 5-day state visit paid by Algerian President Tebboune to China?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this panel for this very important trip by President Tebboune to China. I watched the interview that my colleague did with President Tebboune last night, broadcast live on China Media Group's TV channels. It was quite a success, and as you mentioned, this trip, one of the achievements made by President Tebboune for this trip is formal application to the BRICS group, which is not only important to Algeria but also to BRICS, the mechanism as well, because Algeria is one of the most important, one of the strongest actually economies in Africa, and if BRICS can include Algeria in its group, it will be a big progress, a big deal for BRICS. On overall for the trip marks like the first state visit by a head of state from Algeria in 15 years. It is a big deal for both sides. I can assure you that Algeria has received a lot of exposure among the Chinese public during the past week, and certainly more and more Chinese people are getting to know more about the country, and they could become potential visitors to Algeria. And more Chinese companies now are aware that Algeria is actually one of the great places to invest. And according to the joint statement by both sides, I think the trip has enhanced their mutual understanding of each other and enhanced their joint political positions on a lot of international issues and regional issues in Africa. Algeria and China are old friends. The friendship goes way back from even 1958, when China became the first non-Arab country to recognize Algeria. And this trip by President Tebboune certainly has breathed new life into this traditional friendship.
Very good indeed. Points that have been raised. Coming to you, Mrs. Yvonne Ridley, Algeria is preparing itself to join the BRICS bloc. China and Russia are among the first countries to welcome and support its candidacy. How can we see this? Can we assume that Algeria has already secured its BRICS membership?
Well, it's the way that this relationship is being viewed by Western eyes, and of course the relationship with China and Algeria plus Russia and India. These are exciting times for Algeria. It is the coming together of the so-called BRICS group, which is sending a clear message to the West that we are together, we will support each other, and there is an alternative to the G7. If you won't let us into your group, then we will form our own. And these last 5 days for Algeria signal a new era, because until fairly recently, Algeria has been slightly anchored, if not hampered, by the West. It was supposed to have a visit with the French in February. This was cancelled, and it hasn't been renewed, and there are no plans for a coming together of Algeria or its former colonial master, France. So these are exciting times for the Algerian people, and this meeting of minds with China, the joint statement, is very, very significant, especially with both sides promoting peaceful resolutions to hostile situations. So exciting to
reality today.
Very good indeed, very good indeed. And that's really what President is looking forward, which means actions speaks louder than words. Algeria, with words, with actions, are trying their best to join the BRICS. Mrs. Liu Kun, don't you think that the political rapprochement between Algeria and Beijing is the main motive for Beijing's support for Algeria's accession to the BRICS group? I mean, what is good for China if Algeria joined the BRICS?
I think the political rapprochement is one of the most important factors for China to support Algeria to join the BRICS, but that's not the only factor that China considers, because joining BRICS will be, what the Chinese always say, a win-win situation for both Algeria and BRICS countries. Okay, let me give you some figures. Now, BRICS countries account for more than 40%, I think, if my memory serves me correct, 40% of the entire world population. And the latest figure shows that BRICS countries now account for more than 35% of the world GDP.
Yes, indeed.
If you think about that, and we also the lady in London had just compared the BRICS countries to the G7. The G7 is self-claimed as the world's strongest economic bloc, but to think that that bloc doesn't consider the world's second largest economy, China, it is not only sad, but I think it's a little bit out of sense that G7 still considered itself one of the the biggest economic club in the world. So going back to BRICS, I think why is BRICS important? Because it is not only an integration of the most strongest emerging markets and developing economies in the world, but also it provides new types of economic integration and economic communication exchanges among member states. Algeria is one of the most important economies in Africa, and China and Algeria have accumulated a lot of experiences in terms of trade and investment, as well as infrastructure construction, because China helps Algeria build a lot of projects in the country. For example, big mosques, as well as railways and highways. And also China provides ample medical services to Algeria. So all these experiences can actually be learned and maybe have some relevance for when Algeria actually becomes part of BRICS. I also want to reply to your earlier question of what joining the BRICS can actually bring to Algeria. It brings a lot to Algeria because the BRICS countries now have a mature mechanism which is called the New Development Bank. It is aimed to provide a different source of funding aside from what we already have, the Western type of multinational lending and borrowing agencies, for example, the World Bank, as well as the International Monetary Fund. The New Development Bank has been in operation for some years, and it has already provided funding for quite a number of developing countries and emerging markets. And certainly when Algeria becomes a part of it, the bank can provide funding for what is badly needed in Algeria. I think, and also the new type of economic cooperation among these member states may provide an example to other emerging markets.
Perfectly understood. Now, tackling another topic in our discussion, President Tebboune also expressed his aspiration to establish an Algerian-Chinese partnership in African markets in the face of what he called attempts to bring back colonialism to the continent under a new form.
في كثير من الدول موجودة، قلت لك السكة الحديدية في تنزانيا، الميناء في أبيجان، بالنسبة للهياكل الأخرى في زامبيا وغير زامبيا إلى آخره. والصين مقبولة كثير في إفريقيا، لأن الصين مثل ما قلت في البداية ما توضعش إملاءات سياسية في التصرفات نتاعها مع الأفارقة، مرتاحين لها، يعني ما فيش سيطرة سياسية. أو هذه أملنا إن شاء الله باش نعمل مع الصين كدولة عظمى. والجزائر تعتبر اليوم حاليا في إفريقيا دولة عظمى في إفريقيا كذلك، أننا نكون وساطة بين إفريقيا والصين. اليوم فيه محاولة رجوع الاستعمار بوجه جديد، بما يسمى الاستعمار الجديد. أعتقد هذه الأمور صبحت صعبة على الاستعمار، لأن الشعوب لما نشوف الشعوب الإفريقية اليوم، الشعوب الإفريقية كلها شعوب واعية.
Mrs. Yvonne, really directly to the point, President Tebboune stated that colonialism is trying to return with a new face, and Africans are aware of that. he expressed his aspiration to establish an Algerian-Chinese partnership in the African markets. So if someone can read between the lines, what messages can we draw from these statements, and to whom he is addressing this message?
Well, as I said before, I think that Algeria is about to enter a very new, exciting, brave, courageous period in its life. At the moment, about 20% of the GDP in Algeria comes from the oil and gas sectors. And this is something which is obviously of interest to China, while it's always constantly looking for new sectors in the energy industry. China has wanted to get a firm foothold in Africa for quite a few years, and what better way to do it than in Africa's largest country, which is Algeria. And it has a strategic geographic location. It has this vast desert, and there are untapped resources which have yet to be discovered. And so it's a very exciting time for Algeria. And one of the areas that I think that China wants to explore and help is in tourism, which accounts for less than 1% of Algeria's GDP. So this is a huge resource, a huge untapped resource. It's sitting in a prime location on the Mediterranean, and it has all sorts of untapped potential. And I'm sure that this is something that China can see and seek to benefit from, because China also has global ambitions to extend its road beltway project, which is a project that is very close to President Xi Jinping. So it is an exciting time for Algeria, and if Algeria gets into BRICS, there are a lot of African countries that are queuing up to get into BRICS, and if Algeria breaks into BRICS, then I think that a lot of other African countries will be encouraged to follow. And already BRICS has outperformed the G7 countries for the first time in its history this year. So the future is looking incredibly bright. And Algeria is also telling the West and telling its traditional friends in the West, we have new powerful friends now. And we aren't always going to be reliant on you. So, as I say, this is a brave new era for Algeria, a new page in its history.
Mrs. Yvonne, President started his trip from Qatar, moving to China, and now ending up in Turkey. In your point of view, how can you read this tour?
Well, I think that the start of the journey was quite significant. Qatar may be a tiny state, but it punches well above its weight and has already shown itself to be quite a major regional peace broker. Without Qatar's visionary interference, Afghanistan would still be occupied and at war with US forces. It was an initiative led by Qatar that brought about peace in Afghanistan. So I think it's quite significant that Algeria started off on this 5-day odyssey in Qatar, and the fact that it has now ended in Turkey, another regional power broker that is pushing peaceful solutions in conflicting areas. I think that that's quite significant as well. And I'm wondering if all of these countries, China included, is coming together as a force for peace. Certainly in the joint statement released just a couple of days ago between China and Algeria, peace was very much mentioned and part of this agreement. So if BRICS is going to become known as a force for peace, that will certainly focus the minds of the G7 countries, which sadly, let's face it, have been fueling and supplying weapons to continue the war in Ukraine.
Perfect.
And this war in Ukraine has affected the African countries. There's been a delegation from Africa
With no doubt.
visiting Ukraine and trying to talk peace.
Thank you,
So
Mrs.
are we seeing
Yvonne.
a new era where peace is going to be important?
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Yvonne, for your intervention with us. You joined us live from London. Thank you ever so much for every explanation you have given. Now, I turn to you, Mrs. Liu Kun. How will the region and the whole of the African continent benefit from the firmness of the Algiers-Beijing partnership and the growing bilateral collaboration between the two countries?
I think, as I said earlier, Algeria is one of the countries that in Africa that China has a long time friendship. And I remember back in as I said earlier, China was the first non-Arab country to recognize Algeria back in 1958. And also China, the first ever medical expert team that China has sent overseas was to Algeria. Algeria was among the group of nations that supported restoring the UN membership of the People's Republic of China in 1971. And also Algeria was among the first group of nations that supported the Belt and Road Initiative and joined the Belt and Road Initiative. Algeria, the partnership between China and Algeria is important because the experiences, the cooperation that China and Algeria have already done can provide an example to the partnership between China and other African countries. For example, like I said, the infrastructure projects that China has already helped Algeria to build, both sides can learn a lot from that. And if China is going to help other African countries, improve their infrastructure facilities, these experiences can be used. And over the years, I think since 1963, when China first sent the first medical team to Algeria, China has sent, I think, more than 33,000 medical doctors to Algeria. That enriched Chinese medicine, of course, but also it helped Algeria to improve its public medical services. And as we all know, and figures show that experts and doctors are always needed in some African countries, and certainly these these experiences can be learned too. The partnership is important for Africa because it is old. it goes way back. And if China is going to further enhance its position in Africa, especially through the Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of things that China and Algeria have already done can, be used in other African countries.
Now we are joined live also with Mr. Edmond Gharib, Professor of International Relations from United States. Coming to you, Mr. Edmond Gharib, thank you so much for making it happen to be with us. During an exclusive interview within the Chinese channel, CCTV Argentinian president confirmed that Algeria and China are doing their best to grant Palestine the status of a full member state in the United Nations. Would that be possible, taking into consideration that the double standards of the West concerning the Palestinian cause?
Well, greetings to you and your honorable guests. There is no doubt that in the past we've seen double standards when it came to this issue, the issue of Palestine. Although there are international laws, there are resolutions by the United Nations, these resolutions were not implemented, unfortunately, and to a large extent the United States and some of the European countries did not move forward on these the resolutions. There was always the talk of the two-state solutions, yet at the same time we saw that the other Western countries, especially the United States and some of the others, looking the other way when Israel undermined the idea of two-state solutions by building settlements in the West Bank, by making it very difficult for people in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank to work together. Nevertheless, there is a changing environment. The world is changing. There are amazing changes and transformations taking place on the international scene. The idea of a unilateral world, unilateral power, running and dominating the world, I think, is gone, and we are seeing the emergence of a multipolar world today, and that I think is likely to help bring about some of the changes that are needed, whether it is to reform, for example, possibly the Security Council, bring in more countries into it, and to specifically when it comes to the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli issue, I think this would be a very important change. Even within the United States, you are beginning to see changes in terms of, so including some members of Congress within the African American community, the Arab American community, of course, the Asian American community. The churches are playing an important role in this area, and I think we're seeing change. It may not happen, we may not see the results overnight, but I think there are changes taking place. And I think this area of cooperation between China and Algeria, I think, is very significant. I think we're likely to see maybe some other members of the United Nations, member countries, who are going to support this idea, but still there will be some challenges, and we'll have to wait and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. Very good indeed. Thank you ever so much for the points you have raised. Coming to Mrs. Liu Sun, President of China, Xi Jinping, also reiterates so many times his supporting of the Palestinian cause, as well as the president of our country, Algeria. So, in your point of view, how these bilateral relations between Algeria and China would help Palestine in facing the Western double standards?
Double standards. During last year's China-Arab Leaders Summit that was held in Riyadh, during the speech that President Xi Jinping made, he said this. He said the unfair treatment to Palestinians cannot be continued, and also the aspiration of the Palestinians to establish their own state and country should always be supported. I think coming from the world's second largest economy with such a specific and clear positions is a big deal. And if we also consider that China successfully mediated between Iran and Saudi Arabia last year in Beijing, mediated between these two countries in Beijing and help them restore diplomatic relations. I think China's willingness and also China's effort to bring in more peace in the Middle East is very apparent and can be felt, can be seen by the international community. So all these positions coming to China is a big deal. Also in May this year, I think President Xi Jinping provided 3 major positions to resolving the Palestinian crisis, including helping Palestinians establish their own state and also help with the economic recovery of the Palestinians, and also to always stick to the right direction of talking and negotiations. These positions coming from China is very important to help the cause of the Palestinians. Why Algeria is important in this is because Algeria is one of the most important mediators in the region for a lot of issues, as we discussed during this panel. And I think to President Tebboune coming to China, talking to the Chinese President Xi Jinping, and also reassuring, their consensus in their joint communique regarding the Palestinian issue will provide a strong momentum, to the peaceful solution of the issue.
Very interesting. Now, still with the president's interview, the president also expressed the wish to establish further partnership with China in many fields, including pharmaceutical, higher education, and training in the field space.
ما فيش ميدان اللي ما نتمناش فيه التعامل مع دولة الصين العظمى، سواء في الفضاء، سواء في التعليم العالي، سواء في مساعدتنا على إنجاز أكثر في ميدان الصيدلة، في ميدان الدواء، في ميدان التكوين، وكل ميادين مفتوحة.
Mr. Edmond Gharib, there is a mutual vision of both countries, Algeria and China, on many political issues in the world. But how does this enhance the role of Algerian diplomacy in playing a pivotal role in addressing these issues, especially with Algeria assuming a non-permanent membership in the Security Council?
Well, I think that in itself, Algeria is going to have a voice, a very important voice in the Security Council, and she will reflect and represent the views of the Palestinian people and other peoples who are suffering from oppression or occupation by larger powers. I think we are likely also one of the main ways is, and this is what we've heard from both presidents, President Tebboune and President Xi, about the need for cooperation between these two countries, because both of them are regional important players. China, of course, is a major power on the international scene, but it also has played an important role in the region. It has a historic relationship to Algeria. This relationship goes back to 1955 and specifically since 1958 when Algeria recognized the National Liberation Front and the Algerian liberation movement for independence. Both countries have had a history. They were dominated by foreign powers. Both countries also were developing nations, although China today is a very advanced country, and so is Algeria, making very important progress. The two countries cooperating together in this area, one of the main things, this will be a showcase for other countries in the region, particularly whether it's in the Arab world, whether it's in Africa or across the Mediterranean, about the areas where countries can cooperate together for the benefit of both sides, not just for the benefit of one side at the expense of the other. And I think that is going to be also one of the most important, that nature of the relationships, that agreements that have been signed. There were 19 agreements which have strengthened the strategic partnership that had existed between Algeria and China. And now we have new agreements that are going to go into a variety of areas, not only the traditional areas where you have energy, where you have infrastructure, but your areas where you have in aerospace and renewable energy, and continuing with the infrastructure, the technology, new technologies. I think all of these are going to be very significant, and many countries will be watching in the region and beyond to see how effective, how successful these efforts have been. And so far, these efforts have been very effective, and we've seen, for example, that there are about almost 1,000 companies, Chinese companies, working in Algeria, and we're likely to see more. There is this agreement about having $36 billion of investments. This is also, many countries are going to look at this and see this as the new way to work together. Algeria has also invested $1.6 billion in the bank of the BRICS, as well as it has gotten support to become a member of the BRICS from China, from Russia, and others. There are still some steps to be taken, but I think the support that Algeria is getting is also going to be very significant, and that is likely to have an impact not only just on relations between these countries themselves among the BRICS, but also beyond that. And we're seeing it. In fact, we're beginning to see more and more countries would like to join these organizations. They see them as, in a way, alternative to some of the other international organizations that have not produced a great deal of benefit to the countries involved. For example, we've seen NATO launching three wars in three continents. For example, we saw the war in Afghanistan, we saw the war in Libya, we saw the war in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia, we saw, of course, the Iraq war. All of this, I think countries are looking for new ways where countries can cooperate, where their sovereignty is respected, and they continue to make their own sovereign decisions.
Perfectly understood, and I believe we have reached the limited time of our TV special coverage to this end. All I can say, Mr. Edmond Garib, also thank you ever so much for your explanation. You joined me live from United States. Also, Mrs. Liu Kane, you joined me live from Peking. Thank you ever so much for every explanation you have given. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for also being with us in this late hour. For more updates, you can follow our social media platform, and you can rewatch this special coverage. For this, all I can say at the end, take care of yourself. Good night.
قدم لكم هذا البرنامج برعاية مجمع مدار.